Ah, sumagot ko Can you see me? Anyway, so when the person I was living with left 6 years ago, and to be honest, it as horribly painful as it was, um, the way things were headed, it we needed to part ways, and it was horribly painful. And when he left, I started to watch a few tarot readings because it made me feel more connected to him. And then at some point I stopped because I find I always heard that Christianity and Catholicism disagree with card readings. They see it as the devil's tool. Um, and I get that because I find when I was in jail, I did a few of these readings. I started to read with just regular playing cards like these. And I found that when people are in difficult situations, they want and need clarification, answers, someone to lean on. And sometimes they just want answers. They need to know what's going to happen or how to handle a situation. And I find that at a certain point, I was making decisions based on the card readings, and I found that the more I read for myself, the messages started to completely contradict the reading I did the day before. So the messages were becoming very blurred and unclear. And I found the more I lent on the cards, the more fearful I became because, like I said, the messages started to become contradictory. So I try not to do this very often for myself or for others because my strong feeling in my faith journey is that the more I depend on other people or cards or stones or any of those things, the less my dependence becomes on my own wisdom and God's direction. So my feeling is that card reading um, is very good, especially if I connect with the reader. And when I'm reading for myself, um, I don't know that that's the best idea. Reading for myself is not the best idea. Like, this is okay because I've never had cards jump out at me. I watched a reader the other day that her cards literally jumped out. So this is okay. And so I've been watching a few lately because there's this situation in my life. I feel very persecuted by people. I haven't been clear as to who I've been persecuted by. And so I've been scrolling through the tarots again on YouTube, and I came across a gentleman who goes by the name of Iron of War 93. Iron is a capital I, of is a capital of O, and War is a capital W. So that's Iron of War 93. And on YouTube, it would be at Iron of War 93. And if you're going from a search engine such as Google or Chrome, it would be www.youtube. I think it's .com. I think, um, and then it's at Iron of War 93. You would find it at. I believe that's sort of how you find me, or how you would find him. And I found him to be very good, and I've really connected with his readings, and I'm very, very grateful. So he inspired me to do another one of these on myself, and so like I said, I've done a few of these readings with regular playing cards. Um, as opposed to an actual tarot deck because I have difficulty remembering without reading the meaning of the cards in a book. I have difficulty remembering what they mean. So it's not the best format for me. I don't think I'll ever get it. I used to have a best friend who picked them up right away. Same with guitar. I tried to study guitar briefly, and even after many, many tries, I can't seem to remember where the G chord is, what fingering goes with the G chord. And I've done it many times. It just won't stick in my head. Drums, however, comes very easily to me. I move my hands, my both my feet, all at the same time, probably just from listening to music and tapping my feet and moving my hands, just to keep beat, in sort of imaginary land. So if you're looking to learn an instrument, I do suggest air guitaring, or air drumming, because after time doing that, um, yeah, you get the hang of, if you're listening to a guitar player on the radio or on a YouTube channel or whatever, if you try to recreate the strumming, or the picking, you can actually practice just air guitaring, and I'm sure your parents or family and neighbors would appreciate it if you don't buy a set of drums and electric guitar right off the bat until you get some practice. So, so what we've got here, this card came out first. So to me, in um, diamonds, as might seem logical, would represent money, possibly, right? Um, so what's sticking out here for me, um, the 7 is significant. My adoptive mother, why is 7 significant with my adoptive mother? I feel like 7 significant with my adoptive mother for some reason. I can't remember why. She wasn't born on the 7th, was she? December 7th, is that right? Is that the day Pearl Harbor was bombed? Anyway, my memory's going because of all the injections. So I think my mother was born on December 7th, 1941. So 7's significant. Um, my brother just passed, apparently, like 10 or 11 months ago. And that has been a kick in the gut that I can't even believe is real. I really can't. So what I'm seeing here, so I see a nose here. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if you can see that. So this appears to be a nose to me. Does that look like a nose to you? And so it also looks a bit like a high heel to me too, in the sense that so this looks like the top of the foot. That looks like the pointy toe, and that could be the beginning of the front part of the shoe, and then the heel would be just beyond that. So that can look like, but mostly I see a nose. And so that makes me think of standing out. So I live in an artsy community and have my whole life pretty much. And so nose rings and piercings and things were fairly typical in my town. Whereas other towns, I went to Calgary looking for an artsy ring, and I felt like I went through the whole town and didn't find a single artsy ring. And I didn't really understand, because I've spent most of my life living in Guelph, that I didn't really understand that some towns, Calgary, for example, is a rodeo town. It's horses, and they typically don't have nose rings and eyebrow rings and things like that. So because I grew up in an artsy town, punk rock was fairly prominent in the 80s. Whereas the man I was living with, he moved out east and he was dressing in punk. Then he got the shit kicked out of him all the time because out east, they thought all punk rockers were homosexuals, and yeah, very sort of what we considered archaic ideas here in Guelph. But just, out east is a very hard life. You don't, um, artsy people may not survive out east because of the weather. Artsy people are usually not, you know, weightlifters typically. I mean, I'm not saying they can't be, but typically artsy people are fine boned, thin, fine features, long hair, fragile, eat green, eat lots of vegetarian stuff. That's sort of been my experience with artsy people, because they care. They care about the environment, they care about animals, they care about the life. But when you live, you know, on a rock and there's no vegetation and there's nothing to eat besides the fish, you develop a different attitude around meat consumption. And same, if you live in a harsh climate where there's lots of snow and very little vegetation, it I find we're very hard on people for their diets when we really don't understand that, a lot of areas don't have a grocery store with an abundance of vegetables to pick from or abundance of grains, and I feel that, when God created the planet, whether you believe that when the planet was created, I'm not sure we were meant to eat each other. And, I've been experiencing a lot of dark black magic directed in my direction, my belief. And, again, when the Garden of Eden fell, I don't know how accurate that story is, but when the Garden of Eden fell, apparently um, needing to cover ourselves became an issue, hunger became an issue, and with that came child rearing. And, I think we've really moved away from um, loving our children and seeing our children as the hope for the future. And, I learned a definition from a book called The Wilderness, I believe, by Brene Brown, I believe her name is. And basically, she talked, I think is it her that talks about that? Anyway, she quotes a book, I think, about the meaning of love as being, or the definition of love being the energy we exert to help ourselves or another individual to grow spiritually. It's not about, getting flowers on Valentine's Day. It's not about those kinds of things. It's about helping each other grow spiritually. It's not about getting our rocks off or how many times we have sex or, pretty lingerie or nice underwear. It's about us growing spiritually. And although intercourse and physical love can be a manifestation of love, it should not be the only expression of love in a relationship. And, who we choose as an appropriate partner, sexual partner, has gone right off the wall. Ages, appropriate ages, and, God bringing people together. And I think it's been a very dark planet in the sense that people have started to unite families to keep the wealth, because if you didn't have money or land, I mean, you starved to death. Again, the Garden of Eden and the fall of the Garden of Eden. And now we've gotten so far away from the Garden of Eden that we are all guilty. Men, women, children, animals, we're all guilty now. And so, with the dark things that are going on in my life, I've been hearing that they should go to jail. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know, I've been to jail and I'm not really sure that confining people um, is the answer either. And so I'm beginning to see that, the people that are targeting me, I may have wronged them. And, you get to the point where you get so knee deep in things that you can't back out. You've done so many things wrong that you have to keep going. You have to keep going, because to just admit you've done, I mean, you could be hung, you could be shot, you could be electrocuted, you could be life in prison, and I don't know. Yeah, I'm trying to extend, um, not forgiveness, but just yeah, a little bit of a psychology, basically. We've all gotten so far into something that there doesn't appear to be a way out. The Book of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about the fact that when an alcoholic comes to the doors of AA or NA or CA or whatever, or sex alcoholics, our problem seems so huge. and maybe we have money problems, maybe we're deeply in debt, and maybe we're on the verge of losing our job, and maybe our husband or wife has had enough, and maybe our family's had enough, and our children hate us, and maybe we did rape someone, or maybe we beat someone to death during a blackout and we hid the body. Things like that happen. I think probably if you were to talk to the authorities, they happen way more often than the vast majority of us like to believe. And, a lot of people think that I could never kill someone. But my feeling, there's an expression that everyone is separated on the planet by 6 people. So pick a person. Queen Elizabeth, for example. If you were to take me, if you were to go in the right direction in my people I know, 6 people connect me to the Queen of England. 6 people connect me to the Pope. 6 people connect me to Justin Bieber. 6 people connect me to, I don't know, Roger Rabbit. You know what I'm saying? So, and that I feel that 6 degrees of separation separate us from any experience on the planet. Mass murder, rape, great fortune, falling off a cliff, a tsunami. I feel like if you were to take any individual, good or bad, middle of the road, and give them the certain 6 life experiences, they would be capable of doing any horrific and any great thing on the planet. And that's my feeling. And people don't like to admit that. People like to think of themselves as middle of the road, I find. People don't think they can be great, and people don't think they can be horrible. And I struggle with that because of the judgment that it gets extended. When you've done something really, really great, or you've done something really, really horrible, often people's reactions to you are very much the same. You get hounded by the press, you get talked about a lot, you get criticized, you get blamed. Some people understand you, some people love you, some people hate you. And so I find that when people do middle of the road, there's a lot of admiration to people who, you know, maintain middle of the road. But I really think we should, branch out. I really do. To help us understand one another, first and foremost. And to help the whole planet evolve, I believe it involves understanding at the end of the day. So anyway, so this nose, again, I mentioned the other day on a post that my biological mother seemed only interested in whether I got her nose. So if I was to extend, compassion, my adoptive mother, looked like her nose was broken, very similar to mine. I don't know. Can you see my nose? It got broken again the other day. I got punched in the face by a woman. Anyway, so to extend, she was only like 17, I think, and I don't know if you're in that situation where you're giving birth to a baby and you're giving it up for adoption, and you may be pushed into it, or anyway, I think it would be a very confusing time to know how to feel. And maybe the best she could do was, I hope you don't get made fun of for your nose the way I did, maybe. And that was maybe the extent of what she could understand. So I also see a face in here. This isn't a very good reading, but this is what to bring up. I also see a face in here. So there's one eye, there's another eye, there's a nose, and there's kind of a mouth here. So that's what I see. And I see the face as being horrified. And I see the face being transformed in my mind's eye to sadness and grief. And then I see someone dancing, you know. Actually, I see my mom, my adopted mom. I think, um, you know, I think sometimes, when we experience, when we actually get in touch with what we may have done to hurt people, it's a bit much. It really is a bit much. And I killed my cat. I did. My dad had died 2 days before, and I feel like there was some uh, dark energy involved, and I murdered my cat, and Where was I going with that? I can't remember where I was going with that. But I guess what I was trying to say is that when you get in touch with how you actually hurt something or someone, it almost wrecks you. It really does. And some people would think that, parents that hurt their children um, deserve to be wrecked, and maybe that's true. Um, but when I went to jail, I could have got killed for that, because in jail there's a few things that don't fly. One is hurting children, one is hurting animals. And even though it happened 11 years ago, I still could have got killed for it when the guards let it slip, or I think the guards let it slip. um, so, what was my point? There's a point to that. Um, there's a point to that. Let's see. Anyway, I guess I can't think of it right now. I'm gonna leave that alone for a minute. Um, I just extending forgiveness. So, like I said, this card to me is about my mother, and my mother lost her son, and I lost a brother, and I tried to tell her that my brother was in trouble, and I couldn't help him because my brother didn't love me the way he loved my mother and my father, and he was never he needed my mother's help and my father's help. And unfortunately, codependency between eldest children and mothers who are married to alcoholic fathers is is not well advertised. And an alcoholic husband produces a wife that leans very heavily on her eldest son. And to me, it got very inappropriate, because my brother felt very married to my mother. He became her surrogate husband. When my dad wouldn't want to or be able to do certain things, household things, my brother would step in. My brother's dead now. My adoptive father's dead. My mom's on her own now, and I'm on my own, you know. And so I see my mother blaming herself. I think that's where I was going with that. Is that um, the grief and the guilt can literally take you off this planet very easily. And I find there's very little um, research or understanding or compassion or self love around grief. There really isn't. And death feels very final, you know, very final. My brother's gone, and um, my brother's gone. So anyway, the seven diamonds, I with these cards, with doing a reading with numerical cards, like playing cards. So the seven is two above halfway, so five would be halfway, and three away from 10, which would be a perfect score. So I feel like financially my mother may be in a 7. So she's not super wealthy, but she's not broke, and she's a little average, which is okay. My mother never managed the money, so she never learned to budget. And she was a bit of a spendthrift. She liked to spend. It probably made her feel better, because depression is very difficult to manage. And spending on something gives people a jolt of happiness. Essentially, it's like a drug, like any other. There's an internal drugstore with addiction of any kind: codependency, sex, love, gambling, shopping, food, alcohol, drugs. With drugs and alcohol, there's actually like you ingest something that chemically changes. But with addiction to other things, behavioral things especially, there is an inner chemistry. We feel better. Dopamine or whatever is released when we buy ourselves something nice, a nice vase, or even when we see something beautiful in a store, there's a jolt, right? There's a wow, that's beautiful. And then possessing it sometimes can actually cause depression because it's like a sugar high. You get super happy when you see it, you purchase it, and then you get it home, and either your family gives you a hard time, or it doesn't fit in the space that you tried to buy it for, or it's too big or too small or the wrong color, or it doesn't match. You didn't keep the receipt, or you can't return it, or just buyer's remorse. I shouldn't have bought that. I shouldn't have spent that money. We needed it for this, and now I feel guilty. So I feel like my mother's had to do a lot of work around money and depression. And I feel like my brother really stepped up and taught her those things. And I'm quite sure my mother's quite grateful to the help my brother gave her. And she should be. My brother was devoted, absolutely devoted to my mother. But unfortunately, it was probably one of the things that took him out, which is what I was trying to tell her. He wasn't physically well enough to do the things she required him to do. And I told her basically the last time I really talked to her that you need to learn, if you're going to stay in that house, you need to learn to cut the effing grass. You need to learn to rake the effing grass. You need to learn how to shovel or snowblow that driveway. And if you can't do it, you need to sell the fucking house. And I don't think she did. Maybe she did. I don't know. I haven't been in touch. But my brother wasn't well physically, mentally, or emotionally. And he was trying to take care of his house, work full time, take care of a wife, her kids, my mother, the driveway, the shoveling, and I'm pretty sure my brother hated me because I stepped away. And I stepped away because I was the golden child when I wasn't there. And when I was there, he was the golden child. And when he was there, I was the golden child. And my mother sort of played us against each other. And so I stepped away so my brother could have my parents to himself. He needed that. But it destroyed the family because I seemed to be the only one who saw the pattern. And I couldn't fix it. There's only so much I can do. So this is a heart. This is love to me. The heart's on the card. And it's almost a perfect 10, right? There's things that if I am to be reunited with my family, and that's an if, that we will never get over. There's hurts that we will probably never heal. Betrayals that I felt they did to me, and betrayals they felt I did to them. But at the end, um, a sense of humility, right? And a sense that things work out exactly the way they're supposed to. And I also heard from a psychic that the veil between the afterlife and here is very thin. And if I get through this, I think my thesis will be that we explore the psychic's ability to see to the other side. How thin is that veil? Are we actually all still on the same planet in a different dimension, a different form? And maybe, just maybe, I won't have to die to see my brother and father again. Maybe, just maybe, that at some point the veil will drop and my dad will walk over from the other side. Or maybe, just maybe, we won't be daughter and son anymore. Sorry, daughter and father anymore. Maybe we'll be more equals, right? Because the parent-child relationship is very difficult. the giving up of power, of authority, the giving up of power, the giving up of needing to tell them what to do, moving to a position of equality where you're not, ashamed of your children because they're a reflection of yourself, you know, not ashamed of your family because they're a reflection of you, like you are when you're a teenager. So, the other thing is that, what else do I see in this? I see my mother still loves me. And I always sense that a large part of my problem with my family is my dad and brother. I just never ever, they hurt me very badly. Physically hurt me, sexually hurt me, you know, uh, scared me to death, you know, and that really, really, really interfered with my mother and I's relationship. Sorry, there's birds living on my balcony and they're arguing. And that really, really affected my mother and I's. Okay? That really, really affected my mother and I's relationship. And so I can kind of see why women in the community have turned away from men and turned to each other. I get that. But my purpose, God told me, I think I described this, that I was sitting trying to decide between a lesbian lover and a male lover, and I picked the man, and God said to me, then you will complete your purpose. And I said to God, I said, what was all the homosexual bullshit? And God said, it is a choice. My feeling is that the reason I would have turned to women for a relationship was because I was sexually abused. And to me, and this is just me, to me, if I had dealt with my sexual abuse by turning to women and refusing to be in a male-female relationship, that it would have been the same if I had drank and drugged and smoked and gambled and shopped addictively to handle that trauma. That is my feeling. My true healing will come from having a mutually understanding relationship with a male. Creation happens on this planet as it is between male and females, not between women and women and not between men and men. And I believe in the Bible it says men should not lay with men, because my feeling is anal sex causes great damage. I believe small tears may happen in the anus, which causes possible blood poisoning, which to me may be the cause of AIDS. It's nothing to do with moral judgment. It was merely a warning that many people will die if we don't start realizing that sexual dysfunction happens everywhere. Everywhere. And it's not, if we don't start breaking the silence and talking about the dysfunction, the world will be destroyed. Absolutely. The world will end if we don't begin to talk about it. And that's why, and I've been blamed over and over again that I'm a homosexual, I'm a transgender female, I'm a pedophile. No, I am a survivor of sexual abuse. I'm a survivor of an alcoholic home. I'm a survivor of a codependent home. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm a recovering drug addict. I'm a recovering sex and love addict. I'm a recovering codependent, recovering from eating disorders. And my first assessment at the hospital said I was a bit of everything. And that's normal. And if grief isn't dealt with and abuse isn't addressed and, things aren't brought to the open, then yeah, the symptoms get worse. People become more addicted, people become more mentally ill, people become more isolated, people become more aggressive, less aggressive. So what I see here, it's upside down, but I see B for victory. This is just one of the description cards. I decided not to take it out, but I also see here, you know, in Avatar, there's that man that's after the superhero, the hero of the story. He gets in one of those contraptions and he straps himself in, and basically it has legs and arms, and basically it moves, and he's on the other planet, so he needs it to breathe. That's what that reminds me of, you know, the Avatar movie. So in that Avatar movie, I was touched in that Avatar movie because you know, the base of the movie is humans go to another planet to reap it of everything that's on that planet too. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to another planet and more planets to basically steal and wreck that planet. And that's the devil. To destroy and mess up and destroy life is the devil. And on this card, I don't know if you can see, I'll put it real close if I can. Where is it? The face on that, to me, is smiling. It's a cartoon character and it's smiling. It's smiling. Um, Now, it's a tiger. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like, you know, a laughing cartoon character tiger. And in some ways, humor can heal. And in some ways, we're laughing at the superheroes in our movies. We're laughing at people like me, we're laughing at the marginalized. We're laughing at people who are getting angry at injustices. We're laughing at people in the hospitals, minimizing their feelings, calling them crazy, ridiculous. We're laughing at people's pain. We're laughing when people are getting angry about injustices. We're joking about the loss of life. We're joking about the death of animals. We're 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 cheering at people being murdered. You see where I'm going with this. And then there's the movie V. I believe V that I saw was I believe that's about some sort of spread of some disease that's spreading. I can't quite remember the movie, but I remember it was a politically motivated movie too. But V can be for victory. I think that's what it was for the movie. V can be for victory. And if I'm to look at it this way, there's some Viking music I've been listening to. I see a man with a beard. You look at it this way, I don't know if you can see, but there's uh, a man with a beard. This is the bottom of the beard here, right here. And there's an eye there, an eye there. And like this is like the nose. So if you get into Viking rap, it's very inspirational music. Very much, it's not about my God, but it's about a God. Um, and the art on this, so you know this is art that I very much admire. So the fine lines and like calligraphy and like roses put in there, and you know, just that really appeals to me. You know, that really appeals to me. And so yeah, so it also reminds me of a chandelier to a point. So the beauty of home, the lighting. Because lighting to me is super important in a home. If the weather is really dull, you know, don't leave them on for 4 days if your bill is really high, but turn all the lights on in your apartment or home because it'll it'll make you feel better, right? It just light is very important. And when I got up today, boy, was it dark, and I was being spiritually attacked to such a degree. In my mind's eye, I was being offered a child as a husband. I was being offered by his mother. I was being offered a man that I didn't want, and there was women I know who I've seen lately trying to convince me that the whole point that life is pointless and that we should all just go. And the person that was trying to convince me in my mind's eye lost her daughter a number of years ago. And I can imagine I don't have any children. But the loss of my pet, which was my child essentially, wrecked me, you know. And I can see how life will seem pointless when you have no one to care for, or it feels that way, you know. When we don't have anyone to care for, especially women, we don't have anyone to care for, you know, perhaps our job is meaningless, perhaps everything becomes meaningless, especially when we're in the darkness. Life seems meaningless. Where are we going? And I was wondering the other day, if we go to heaven, is it much like earth? You know, if I didn't have to worry about money, where would I go? You know, there's thousands upon thousands of books in the library. And I walk in there and I'm overwhelmed. But if I had eternity, like literally didn't have to worry about time ever again, if I had eternity to read those books, you know, and I didn't have eyesight problems, and if if I didn't want to read, there was always someone there to read it to me, and we could laugh at the funny parts and cry at the sad parts, you know. But if I had all eternity, I didn't have to stay in the library, you know. And if I went through and asked God which book should I read first, you know, which is essentially asking God for help when you're standing in the library, or ask a friend about a book, you know, I'm struggling with this, you know, ask a healer in heaven. But if this planet can be both heaven and earth, possibly, you know, if this is all there is, or sorry, heaven, hell, and earth, you know, what if there is no escape from this planet? And that's why the Buddhists believe in reincarnation. When I say escape, maybe this planet is all or nothing. This is all we get. And this is where we stay. But if we can't come back as human, then we come back as a bird. If we can't come back as a bird, then we come back as a wolf. If we can't come back as a wolf, we come back as a bug. When we're in heaven for a time or with God, He and we decide, you know, He and we decide what would be best for us. And then we get forgetfulness. Because if we knew what lessons we were supposed to learn, you know, if we knew that behind door number 1, or if we go down this street, we're going to get into a bad car accident, or sideswipe someone, it's going to ruin our life because we've been drinking and driving, we would go the other way. So forgetfulness helps us to encounter our lessons. So I got a perfect 10 financially. Now I did that. I got in touch with compassion, humility, God, my relatives, my ancestors. And I tried to extend forgiveness to myself and others. I admitted my wrongs in front of my peers. And yeah. And in the 12 steps, that's what we do. We admit our wrongs, we make amends, and we try to practice the principles in all our affairs, and to practice it and to spread the message to others. And part of it becomes what do they call it? A formula or a guide for living. A program for living, a recipe for living. What is it? We have a program for living, essentially. And that's about all it is, you know. Try to understand that we have problems. That's step 1. Try to understand that step 2, that we need help with those problems, and there's something larger than us, whether it's, you know, 12 steps or the Bible or a church group or friends or family or writing or whatever, that there's a method. In the third step, we turn, we decide to access that for help, go to that for help. The fourth, we take an inventory of what's wrong with our life and what we did and what they did and how it affected us and how it's still affecting us. And then on the fifth step, we tell that to someone. And I did, with the worst thing I felt I'd ever done. I'm going to stop at the Ace of Spades because 8 was my brother's favorite number. And my first real apartment was 808 downtown. And I never invited my brother there. I never invited my family there. Ever. Yeah. And the reason I never did that is because when I was away on a trip, there's Victor again. When I was away on a trip with a school friend to a wedding out west, when I came back, in my mind they murdered my dog. My dog was sick. I discovered 5 lumps under his neck, and my parents were paying for chemo. And when I came back, they'd put him to sleep without telling me, without letting me say goodbye. That dog was my world. So, and on top of the adoption, on top of my dad's temper, the sexual abuse, the mistreatment of my brother, the codependency of my mother, I lost my shit. And within 3 months, I was drinking, smoking, doing drugs. I moved out of the house. I was no longer talking to my family. Yeah. So when I moved out to 808, my family wasn't welcome. I got lots of trouble. Perfect 10. Lots of trouble. And then I got sober. And I thought things were going to get better. And they did. And I lost my cat. Chelsea was now on my fridge. I lost Chelsea. And I had 2 drinks. And the suicide attempts started. Because again, I had no support. No support. I wasn't very good at communicating how I was feeling. And I guess I often looked like I knew what I was doing. But instead of my friends gathering around me when that happened and I tried to take my own life, everybody moved away from me because nobody knew what to do. Well, I don't know. Neither do I. Neither do I. So yeah. But, it led me on a journey where, I've had to be alone for a long time. And I've had to dig deep and believe in God, essentially. And believe that love exists. Even though, I may not be in those people's lives, there'll be times when they think of me and they hate me. And there'll be times they think of me when they love me. And unfortunately on this planet, that's kind of how it goes. People can't seem to hold both feelings at the same time. Most people. At least damaged people. Most people feel one or the other. And so when you ask them how they feel about their daughter when they're angry, she's a stupid bitch. I hate her. She caused this. She caused this. She needs to pay. If you ask her when things are good, oh, my daughter's lovely. She did this, sent me flowers, bought me dinner, whatever. Invited me for lunch. And that's how it goes with an abused family. That's how it goes. Borderline personality disorder. Can't hold 2 opposing thoughts in our minds at the same time. And that's how it goes. Addicts feel things. Borderline personality disorder. Feel things too intensely. When I feel really upset, I have to do something to help myself not feel that. So I eat something. So I drink something. So I take something. So I buy something. So I sleep with someone. That's how it goes. And now I feel better. Or at least this is a distraction. Right? My dad died. He was my biggest abuser, but he was my biggest fan. And I lost my shit. And I committed a crime and killed my cat because that I could control. That was a bigger distraction, and it had to be big. It had to be big. And I can't take that back. I can't. I can't take it back. I just can't. Clubs is luck, right? Good fortune and luck. The ace. Maybe I'll ace it this time. And like I said, if I can do a thesis or do more research on just what people mean by the thin veil between heaven and earth, you know, maybe my cat's back on the planet as a human. You know, maybe. And I can make amends. Because that's the 8th step in Alcoholics Anonymous. Make a list, and 9 is make amends. And maybe, just maybe, you know, maybe just maybe, the next time I make a mistake, or the next time I'm feeling a really strong emotion, I can call a friend. I honestly didn't think I could depend on my family. Honestly. Every time I think about calling a friend, I picture how that conversation's going to go, and they're going to go there, or they're going to blame me, or they're going to deflect, or they're going to get angry with me, or they're going to say they have to get off the phone, or they're going to say they're busy, or they're going to say that they're watching a show with and they can't talk to me right now, but they're not going to set up another time, or they're not going to answer the phone, or they're going to, you know, you have to text them the whole and you can't see because you're crying. That's how I felt. I felt that I couldn't turn to anyone. And I didn't. So, and there's the Joker. There's the Joker. And I think my brother felt like an idiot a lot of the time. You know, when he'd ask questions, he wasn't very smart in some ways because he was terrified. He was terrified. I see people like that all the time, you know, that literally they're so scared they can't think straight. And my dad scared my brother so bad that he couldn't think straight. And he was bullied so bad that he couldn't think straight. You know, two J's. Two J's. Right? Now, all the young men are dying. Jay Kelly, Brett McDonald, Joe Kane, David McWhinney, you know. And the list may have gone on, you know. The list may have gone on. You know. Two red jokers. You know. My brother again. Right? Anyway, I'm gonna end it there. Um, you know, I know that I was watching something. What was I watching? That I was listening to a speaker tape, an Alcoholics Anonymous speaker tape, and there was a woman named Gail, and she said that you know she's rides a motorcycle, and you know so half the time she's in leathers, and the other half time she's in a skirt. So she says when she speaks at an AA meeting, she's in a skirt, you know, she's got half the people. And then when she comes back as a biker, she loses that half. And then she gains the other half. So, you know, I guess what I'd say is that, you know, we're not all so different. We really aren't. And another person in Alcoholics Anonymous said that um, that if someone crosses you or they do something that you get angry at or think is really stupid, wait 2 weeks and you'll probably do exactly the same thing. Unity. Yo. Thanks for listening.